The orphanage was always alive with the sound of children, laughter echoing down the halls, playful arguments over toys, and the occasional wail of frustration, but amidst the noise, little Emma was a quiet shadow, a girl of 5 who had never spoken a single word. She had arrived at the home after losing her parents in a tragic accident, and though time had passed, her silence remained unbroken, a heavy wall that no one could climb. Teachers tried every method to coax a sound from her lips, colorful flashcards, sing-along games, even the promise of candy, but Emma only sat still, her wide brown eyes fixed on them with a haunting kind of sadness, her tiny lips sealed. Some of the children whispered that she was broken, others teased her cruelly, and though the staff tried to protect her, they too began to believe she might never speak. The doctors called it trauma, a scar of the soul too deep to heal with simple therapy, and so Emma became known as the silent child, drifting through her days like a ghost in the noisy orphanage. Yet there was one person who noticed her in a different way, someone who never treated her as a case or a problem to be solved: Henry, the old janitor. He was a man no one paid much attention to, moving through the halls with his broom and mop, his gray hair untidy, his clothes rough and smelling faintly of sawdust. The staff regarded him as part of the background, a fixture of the building, and the children rarely gave him more than a passing glance. But Emma noticed him. Her gaze would follow him as he hummed softly to himself while sweeping the corridors, his footsteps slow but steady, his presence gentle and calm like a steady candle in the dark. Henry never asked her to speak, never pressured her with questions. Instead, he would sometimes leave a small surprise for her, a shiny marble, a paper crane, or once, a little wooden bird he had carved during his breaks. When he handed it to her, he simply whispered, "One day, you'll fly, little one." Emma held on to that bird as if it were the most precious treasure in the world, sleeping with it clutched tightly in her tiny hand each night. Though no words passed her lips, her heart had already begun to form an invisible bridge to the man everyone else ignored. As the days turned into weeks, Emma's silent attachment to Henry grew stronger, unnoticed by most but deeply felt by her. Every evening, when the other children were tucked into their beds and the noise of the day faded into a hush, Emma would quietly slip from beneath her blanket and sit by her bedroom door, peeking into the dimly lit hallway. There, she would wait for Henry. He came like clockwork, pushing his broom slowly down the corridor, the faint glow of his lantern casting soft shadows against the walls. He never scolded her for being out of bed. Instead, he would nod in gentle acknowledgement, his eyes kind and patient. Often, he would hum as he worked. Old songs from a time long past, melodies that carried a soothing rhythm Emma found herself drawn to. The staff never sang to her without expecting something in return, but Henry's music asked for nothing. Sometimes, he would stop, reach into his pocket, and pull out a small gift, a button polished smooth, a carved figurine, or a folded scrap of paper turned into a bird. To anyone else, they were simple trinkets, but to Emma, they were priceless tokens of care. One evening, as thunder rolled outside, Henry placed his broom aside and sat near her, handing her a carved wooden rabbit. "It's yours," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of a man who had lived through loneliness himself. Emma took it reverently, her little fingers tracing the lines he had etched with such care. She didn't speak, not yet, but her eyes lit up in a way Henry understood. Unlike the teachers, who grew frustrated when she didn't respond, Henry seemed content with silence, as if he knew her unspoken words. To the rest of the orphanage, Henry was just the janitor, invisible in his work, a man who swept floors and fixed leaky pipes, but to Emma, he was a safe harbor. Each night she listened to his soft humming, her heart calmer, her fears quieted. For the first time since the accident that had stolen her voice, Emma began to feel seen, not as the silent orphan everyone pitied, but as a little girl worthy of patience, kindness, and love. The night the storm came, the orphanage seemed to tremble under the weight of the wind and rain, the windows rattling as lightning split the sky in blinding flashes. The children huddled together in their dormitory, some whimpering, some crying outright, as the power flickered and finally went out, plunging the building into darkness broken only by the jagged glow of the storm outside. Emma, who usually bore everything in silence, felt terror claw at her chest, her tiny hands clutching the wooden bird Henry had given her as she curled under her blanket. For the first time, her composure cracked and sobs racked her small frame, soft at first but growing desperate when the staff tried to comfort her with hurried words. She pulled away from them, shaking her head, her wide eyes glistening with tears that refused to stop. Just then, heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway, and the beam of a lantern cut through the darkness. Henry appeared in the doorway, his presence calm and steady despite the chaos. The children quieted, drawn to the man who seemed unaffected by the storm, but Emma sat bolt upright, her eyes fixed only on him. She reached out her arms in desperation, and Henry crossed the room without hesitation, kneeling beside her bed. "It's all right, little one," he murmured, his rough hand gently patting her trembling fingers. The room held its breath as Emma buried her face against him, clutching his shirt as though her life depended on it. And then it happened. So soft at first that many thought they imagined it, a single word formed on her lips, Henry. It was not a cry, not a plea, but a name, her very first word, spoken with a fragile kind of certainty that pierced the silence. The staff froze, staring in disbelief, their hearts racing as they realized what they had just witnessed. Emma had broken years of silence, not for the teachers, not for the doctors, but for the man everyone ignored, the janitor who had given her nothing but quiet kindness. Henry's eyes welled with tears, though his voice remained steady as he whispered back, "I'm here." In that moment it was clear to everyone, the wall Emma had built around her heart had crumbled, but only for him. From the moment Emma spoke Henry's name, the orphanage seemed to shift, as if the old walls themselves had witnessed a miracle. The staff, once skeptical, began to see Henry in a new light, realizing that the quiet janitor who swept their floors had given something no doctor or teacher could, hope. In the days that followed, Emma slowly began to speak more, her words shy but sure whenever Henry was near. She called him for simple things, sit, come, bird, and each time her voice grew a little stronger, her confidence rooted in the comfort of his presence. The other children, who once teased her, now looked at Henry with a mixture of awe and curiosity, wondering what made him so different. The director of the orphanage, a stern woman who prided herself on order, wrestled with the truth that the man she had barely acknowledged was the one who had unlocked Emma's voice. Soon, conversations began about her future. Families visited, interested in adopting the little girl who had finally broken her silence, but Emma clung to Henry with a desperate grip, shaking her head at the idea of leaving him behind. "She needs stability," the director admitted one evening, her voice softened with rare humility. "She found it in you, Henry." The paperwork that followed was long and complicated, but for Henry, who had lived most of his life in solitude, it was worth every moment. When the day came, Emma slipped her small hand into his, beaming as if she had always belonged there. The other children waved goodbye, some with tears, others with smiles, but Emma didn't look back. She pressed close to Henry, her voice clear and sure as she whispered, "Daddy." The word broke him in the best way possible, his eyes flooding with tears as he lifted her into his arms. The man everyone had ignored, the one who blended into the background of countless busy days, had become the center of a little girl's world. And in return, she gave him something he never thought he'd have, a family. For Emma, who had once been the silent child, and Henry, the overlooked janitor, the world had finally heard their voices, woven together in love that no one could ignore again.